It was such an exciting moment that I turned to see if everyone around me was sharing the same exultation and pure pride that I was feeling. But that was when I saw Agent Saltz. His eyes were glued dangerously on the prince, and suddenly I remembered my vital role. I backed away with as much stealth as I could manage, heart beating in my throat. But I needn't have worried. No one was watching me now. Alone, I fled down the corridor, turning down the east wing, and finally reaching the stairs that led to the nursery 2 stories above. This part of the house was built on the older foundations where the original manor had once stood in its full glory. The walls were thicker here, and I felt the temperature drop as I left the heated part of the house behind and ascended upwards. Despite the dimness, I reached the final floor and went straight to the nursery, walking more by memory than by sight. It opened up to a large room, lit only by the residual lights of the stables below. After the candlelight and noise of the party, the room was stark in its stillness and pungent with recollections of the past. The dollhouse and the rocking chair, the stuffed bears and train set, the globe and the little set of tin soldiers, and the lines of books on the wall were all where they had been the last time I had set foot in this room, and I thought I could still smell the ginger biscuits and Mrs. Harley's carpet cleaner. I paused only a moment to take it all in before starting for the fireplace. It was located in the far wall and was swept clean and bare. But then something made me come to a full stop. I don't know what it was, a breath of sound, a premonition. I turned around. Standing in the doorway was Agent Saltz. I couldn't see his face, but there was just enough light for me to recognize his form. "What are you doing here?" I said. It was a stupid question. I knew exactly what he was doing here. But I had to say something while I was thinking. Only my brain was working slowly because, for the life of me, I could not figure out how to get him out of the room. "You knew the prince was here all along, didn't you? You and Mr. Easton planned from the beginning to bring the seal here in order to give it to him tonight. We all knew the boy was out east somewhere, but all the intelligence we received pointed our suspicions to the Northern Territory." He took a step forward into the room, and I could hear that he was breathing heavily. "And when you ran away from the excitement, I knew it could only mean one thing. You were fetching the seal. Why it was ever trusted into your hands, I'll never know, but I salute you. You've managed to hide it from everyone, even me, until now." "The seal?" I said, holding out my hands to show that they were empty. "I don't have the seal." He took a step closer. "You're afraid of me, but there's no more need to be afraid. We're all on the same side here. Show me where it is, and you and I will take it together to Sir John Robert." I backed away, careful to steer myself far away from the fireplace. He advanced into the room, following me into the corner. He asked, "Don't you believe me?" "No, she doesn't," George said from behind him, "and neither do I." Saltz calmly turned around. "Captain, yet again you've proven your diligence. The seal is here. I'll bet my life on it." "Why would the great seal be in the nursery of all places?" I asked with some disdain, but mostly bravado. I couldn't decide yet if I was relieved or not to see George here. After all, he might be on the same errand as Agent Saltz. I swallowed and said, "Do you think Sir John Robert is fool enough to hide it here?" "It's all right, Lisbette," George said, stepping out of the shadows so that I could see his face now. He raised his hand slightly in a gesture of surrender. "I know that Timothy isn't a traitor anymore. I understand why you didn't trust me from the start, but you can trust me now." "Forgive me, but I don't know if I can," I said. "Heaven knows I've given you enough reasons in the last 24 hours not to trust me, although in my defense you're enough to drive any man to madness, especially as one as sleep-deprived as I am." He paused. "But if the seal is here, I just want to make sure it gets safely to the prince, and to make sure no one stops you from doing it." There was a clicking sound, and George and I both turned to see Agent Saltz with a cocked gun in his hand. "As do I," he said to George, "the rightful prince, that is. You see, Prince Frederick is the one that should really decide if young Prince Henrik is old enough for such a responsibility. Now get the seal and hand it over." I stamped my foot. "Put that gun away! How dare you bring a gun into this house?" But my anger turned cold as Agent Saltz walked over to George and put the barrel to the captain's head. Being a short man, he had to reach up slightly, but that didn't make the gun any less dangerous. "Give me the seal, or I will shoot him." "Don't do it," George said to me. I might have been frightened, but I had not lost all my reason yet. I rolled my eyes. "Stop being heroic, George. This is neither the place nor the time." "Then you'll hand it over?" Agent Saltz said. "Oh, yes, but you should know that you don't stand a chance leaving this place alive with the seal, not with a red guard outside." "Let me worry about that," he said. "The seal, please." "It's in the chimney way up on a shelf." "Then get it," he said, "now." I felt myself trembling, but I was reasonably sure that I was hiding it. "Very well, just give me a moment to reach it." "Lisbette, no," George said. "Don't give it to him." "Calm down, George," I said, smoothing my dress. "It's just the seal in the end, isn't it?" I didn't wait for him to answer. My breathing was shallow as I ducked under the chimney. I stepped inside and managed to stand up straight. The chimney was hundreds of years old now and had been made to accommodate full-grown chimney sweeps. Inside, it was as dark and narrow as a coffin. At once my lungs constricted, but I concentrated on feeling for the shelf. The last time I had been in this position I had been a foot or so shorter and had required a stool. But I thought I remembered the general position of our old hiding place. Suddenly my hand touched a hollow spot. Reaching inside, I touched the warm metal of the seal. I gripped it, feeling its familiar weight in my hand. "Have you got it?" I heard Saltz's voice. "Not yet, I have to climb a little," I said as I lifted my elbows. Digging them against the wall, I hoisted myself up. I heard him say something, but by then I had raised my knees. Quickly as I could, I started up the narrow chamber toward the distant point where the chimney met the sky. I had precious moments before he was going to figure out that I was giving him the slip, but by this point all my fear of Saltz was swallowed by the pressing torture of suffocation. It was amazingly hot inside the cold chimney. Not only that, but I was certain that the chimney walls were narrowing. There was an excellent chance that at any moment I was going to wedge myself in so tightly that they'd never get me out. My gloves protected my elbows and wrists, but my cap sleeves were ripping as they scraped against the rough walls. I began to pant. My foot lost hold against the cinder blocks, and I slipped down several inches before I could catch myself. By now my muscles were trembling and aching with fatigue, and my chest was so tight that my head was swirling. The seal was heavy and slippery in my gloved hand. The harder I held onto it, the more it seemed to drag me down. "Just keep moving," I told myself. "Don't think, just move." But it was becoming ever harder to obey myself. I was fighting gravity and my own sense of doom, both of which threatened not only my success but my survival. Worse, I was getting white spots in front of my eyes from hyperventilating. Any moment I knew my body was going to drop back down to the chimney floor, where I would snap both my legs, if not my spine as well. And just when I thought it might be worth it to fall, I remembered Henry. If I let Saltz get his hands on this seal now, Henry might not ever be king. He might never even see his next birthday. I roused myself and inched upwards. The gun fired and I froze. Had Saltz just killed George? And was he going to aim the gun up the chimney next and shoot me as well? I forced myself to move. If I was going to die, at least I was going to die trying to escape. The pain from where the rough walls had ripped through my fragile dress and scraped my shoulders and knees served as a distraction from the sensation of being squeezed to death. There was no light to guide me, just the endless vertical tunnel that grew tighter with every inch. I reached up with my elbow once more and hoisted myself up one last time, but where my shoulders should have felt rough stone, I felt a gap. Carefully I lifted my free hand and felt the empty space. My hand touched iron, and I laughed. I had made it. I'd reached the attic access. I ran my hand over the flat metal surface until I found the latch. With clumsy, blind fingers, I wiggled it, all the while wondering why Agent Saltz hadn't shot me yet. The latch was stuck, but I was undaunted. Don't ever underestimate me when I'm fighting for freedom and for air. I win every time. I made my hand into a fist and beat that latch until it budged, and when it budged, I took hold of it with my fingers and forced the thing to turn. The door opened.